Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is chip. And this verb was suggested by the viewer Luis. Luis, thank you so much for your suggestion. Now let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb chip can mean to cut or break a small piece from a hard material. Just in the last few days, I saw a family member trying to break apart some ice that was in the freezer that had kind of built up in there. And this would be the perfect verb to describe that action. So the family member was chipping the ice out of a particular area or compartment. Now, a second and related way you might encounter the verb chip can mean to break at the edge or to break on the surface of something. With this second definition, a lot of people's mind will go to paint. And this can be a variety of kinds of paint, but when it becomes very old and dried, it can start to break into very tiny pieces and then come off the edge or surface of a piece of furniture or wall, what have you. A third way the word chip gets used as a verb can mean to implant a microchip under the skin of an animal for purposes of identification and tracking. So with this third definition, again, we're thinking of a shortened form of microchip, and that's how we get that verb. So you might hear people use that as a verb. I'm microchipping a particular pet, or they might just say I'm chipping a pet. A fourth way to use the verb chip can mean to kick or strike a ball or some sort of shot in order to produce a rather short, either lobbed, kind of, so a really sort of gentle up in the air and down type of shot or pass. This is most commonly going to be used in golf or soccer, and it could be used in other sports as well, but I think those are the two places you would encounter it most. For now, you should know that chip is a regular verb. We are going to have a spelling change as we make our progressive, past tense, and participle forms of the verb. And the reason for this is we have a one-syllable word that ends in the pattern of consonant, vowel, consonant. So anytime we're adding a suffix that starts with a vowel letter, we need to double that ending consonant. So the progressive form of our verb, chipping, is going to have two P's and then an ing. The past tense and the participle form, again, will have two P's and an ed. The base verb, chip, ends in an unvoiced P sound. This means when I add ed to it, I'm going to make a T sound, and I'm not going to add an extra syllable to the verb when I pronounce it. So the past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: chipped, chipped. Okay. Now, I do have a couple of phrasal verbs for us to discuss. The first is to chip at. This can mean that someone is engraving or cutting by chipping away at a surface. So think of making those small breaks, again, out on the edge of something. An example of this could be, she chipped at her nail polish nervously. Right? So here, maybe someone's using their fingernails, maybe they're using something else to sort of cut away at the paint that had been located there. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to chip away or chip away at. This can mean we're gradually making something smaller or weaker. An example of this could be, tariffs will chip away at consumer spending. So tariffs or taxes on imports here are being described as weakening or lessening the amount of money individuals will spend. A third phrasal verb you might encounter is to chip in or chip in for. This can mean to contribute money or labor to something. An example of this: we all chipped in for a retirement gift. So what this is describing is everybody gave a few dollars or a small amount of money in order to get maybe a nicer sort of gift for this person who is retiring from work. Now, there is a second way to use chip in, and that can mean to interrupt, either with comments or to interject would be another way to describe that. An example of this in a sentence could be, you should chip in with ideas on how we can resolve these issues. So many times we think of interrupting as being rather negative, but it sounds like from this sentence it is being encouraged. This might be a time where the more ideas we have, the better it will be, or maybe the more likely we'll be able to find a good way to solve some problems. The last phrasal verb we'll discuss is to chip off. This can mean to break off a piece from a whole or entire thing. An example of this: the paint is chipping off now. So we could be describing a piece of furniture, or we could be describing a wall, but little pieces are likely breaking off from that entire object or thing. Now let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today we'll practice the simple present and the simple future. Let's start with the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about our habits and our routines. These are actions that repeat again and again, usually with some known frequency. We can also use this verb tense to discuss facts. And the simple present is a verb tense where we must pay attention to our subject. So in the affirmative or with positive sentences, we're going to start with a subject, and if that subject is I, you, we, or they, then we're just going to use the base verb. No suffixes or no special endings on the verb. But if our subject is he, she, or it, we need to add an S to the end of the verb. You can see that in this example sentence here. He chips the ball whenever he is 20 to 40 yards from the hole. This sentence seems to be describing a particular golfer's habit or routine. That's to hit that sort of lobbing kind of shot when the person is fairly close, but not really close to the hole. Now let's look at making negative sentences in the simple present. To do this, again, we have to pay attention to our subject. If the subject is I, you, we, or they, we'll use do, not, and then the base verb. But if our subject is he, she, or it, we should use does not, and then the base verb. Notice I'm not adding an S to the end of the verb here in the negative. An example sentence could be, this lacquer paint does not chip. So maybe this is a professional painter working with some clients, and they're trying to select. And so this lacquer usually has a very shiny finish to it. And this person must be making sort of a factual statement about what they have observed. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple present. To do this, we want to start with either do or does, whatever form matches our subject. That subject comes next. Then we will use the base verb. Again, I'm not adding an S to the end of the verb in my yes or no question. Here's my last simple present example. Does he chip ice off the car every day in the winter? This is a question about someone's habit or their routine. Now let's move on and talk about the simple future. Today we're going to focus on sentences with will. Will is commonly used as people make predictions and promises. It might be used to make an offer as well. Sometimes people will use it to discuss their plans, particularly when they're a little less certain about those plans. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple future with will is that our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative or positive sentences, we start with a subject, we use will, and then the base verb. No special endings on our verbs here. Here's an example sentence. You will chip your tooth if you aren't careful. Okay. Now, we don't have a lot of details to know what seems dangerous, but the sentence does seem to be making a prediction that if someone's not careful, they're going to break a small piece from their tooth. Now, let's move on and talk about some sentences in the negative. Again, our structure is going to stay the same no matter what our subject is. So in the negative, we'll use our subject, will not, and then the base verb. The thing that can sometimes be tricky here is the contraction form. So will not is going to become won't with a long O sound, and it's spelled W-O-N apostrophe T. Here's an example sentence. This powder-coated structural steel won't chip or fade. So here maybe we have some designer, architectural expert, or engineer making plans around the construction of something. And whatever is being made here, we don't want it to either fade or have the color become maybe less intense, less pronounced. And we don't want it to break apart. Right? So it sounds like here maybe a promise is being made or a prediction that these kinds of problems won't occur. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, start with will, then use your subject, and then the base verb. Here's my last example. Will you chip your puppy? Right, so here that's going back to that idea of inserting a microchip into a young dog. Okay. Now, let's move on and talk about some words that are related to our verb chip. And there are so many different ways to use the noun chip. We're going to talk about several of them. I think I have 7 definitions for us to look at here. But first, what you'll notice is that the noun chip has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. One way to use this noun is to refer to a small piece of something that either has been removed in the course of chopping or cutting or breaking some kind of hard material, maybe like wood or stone. An example of this could be, the family used cedar chips to cover the ground in the play area. Here, this is referring to small pieces from a cedar tree. That's how we get this name. So, and pretty common to see various materials used to make those small pieces. Now, a second way to use the noun chip is to refer to either a hole or some kind of mark on a hard object or surface where a small piece has broken off. An example of this could be, there's a chip in this bowl. So it doesn't mean the entire bowl has been broken into pieces, but a small piece of the material is no longer there. It's missing, or it has broken off. A third way to use the noun chip is to refer to a thin slice of food. And most commonly in the United States, that's going to refer to potatoes, but it could be other vegetables or fruits that have been made crisp by being fried, baked, or dried. And quite frequently, these are eaten as snacks. So someone might ask you, do you enjoy snacking on chips? Okay. Now, I know this can have a different meaning in the UK, but that is not my area of expertise. We'll keep moving to our 4th definition of chip, which is a small chunk of candy, and most frequently that would be chocolate, that has been added to some desserts or cookies or other sweets. An example of this could be, I baked chocolate chip cookies yesterday. A fifth way to use the noun chip is to talk about that tiny wafer of semiconducting material that's used to make integrated circuits. Again, this is most commonly referred to as a microchip, but sometimes that does get shortened down. So an example of this in a sentence could be, there can be as many as 160 chips in a cell phone. A sixth way to use the noun chip can refer to counters that are used in certain gambling games to represent money. Many times these could be different colored bits of plastic. They might kind of look like coins, but sometimes larger. So you might hear somebody ask another person, how many chips did you win in that last hand? So they might be playing several hands or rounds of card games and gambling on the outcomes. Now, our last way to use chip is going to be referred to that short, lofted kick or shot. This ties back to that fourth definition of the verb. An example of this, I can't believe she scored on a chip shot. Right? So this is not someone struck the ball as hard as they could at a goal, right? But they kind of hit that sort of light, lofting, so it goes up high in the air, but it's usually not done with a lot of force. Now let's move on, and we'll talk about another related word. It's the noun chipper. That ER suffix is going to tell us this is a person or thing that turns something into chips. An example of that might be the chipper will turn the fallen limbs into mulch. Sometimes this is a shortened form of wood chipper, and that idea of taking maybe like the entire trunk of a tree and breaking it into those really small kinds of pieces. Now, I should note, chipper can also be an adjective that can mean cheerful and lively. An example of this might be, she gives everyone a chipper greeting every morning. So here we're talking about another person's habit or routine of being very cheerful and lively and saying hello in a very friendly, sort of excited kind of way. Thanks again to Luis for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.